the software you create for buildings, like it's running a real building. It has an impact on things in like very much in the real world, whether that be the energy use of the building, the comfort of the occupants, which has impacts on health and productivity. Like it's as real as it gets.
That was Brad White talking about the real change that folks in his industry have on people's lives and the environment. Brad's industry is smart buildings, and he is the president of SES Consulting, an engineering firm based in Vancouver that specializes in energy efficiency and conservation for commercial buildings. I spoke with Brad to find out what smart buildings are, what he looks for in a new hire, and why an engineer or developer might consider the smart buildings industry a smart career move. What he had to say was informative and inspirational. Our discussion revealed an industry that's often overlooked by many of us, yet it's one that has an enormous impact on almost every part of our life. Okay, so I thought we'd start off what it is that SES does.
Okay, so SES Consulting, we are nominally an engineering consulting company we're based in Vancouver, Canada. We've been around since, let's say, 2007. And we're about a 20-person firm consisting mostly of engineers, but some other sustainability professionals, technologists, that sort of thing. And our focus really is on the existing building space and kind of everything to do with energy and carbon in that space. So, if you asked me 5 years ago what we did, I would have said, energy efficiency in buildings and smart building automation, kind of as an aside to that. So, historically, our projects were building recommissioning, designing new control systems for buildings, whether they be replacements or sort of new installs for buildings that previously didn't have smart building systems. But now, in the last 2 or 3 years, I really would say add on to that, building, decarbonization and electrification work has become a big focus. And we really work exclusively in existing buildings, which I think is one thing we do a bit differently. We don't really touch new construction. So I think we really understand the operations piece, and we work closely with building operators and really try to understand how these systems are going to work in the real world and operate over the long term. So a very practical approach to the engineering side.
So it sounds like you've seen a lot, maybe a shift in attitudes towards decarbonization.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And the shift is it's really been dramatic, I say, in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know if COVID is responsible in any way, but the timing kind of lines up with, COVID and pretty much since then, carbon has really been at the forefront of a lot of the discussions we've had with clients. And, certainly, the dollars and the bottom line are still a big factor, but we have a lot of clients pursuing projects that now they don't save any money. So, for example, we look at if we're fuel switching often from natural gas to electricity, well, the electricity is more expensive. So even if we're being more efficient, it ends up costing them more. But the payoff in terms of a lower carbon footprint justifies that investment and that expense. And that's what I say, that's different. That those aren't conversations we had with any clients 5 years ago. You couldn't convince somebody to do a project that didn't have at least some kind of payback associated with it, except in maybe very rare instances you're doing a pilot project or something. But now we're routinely pursuing projects that have, quite frankly, no benefit other than the carbon reduction. And so that's really, and I'd say that's not just that sort of public sector clients, private sector clients. It's residential, it's commercial. We see it sort of all across, the whole spectrum of clients that we work with.
Well, let's talk a little bit about one of the factors being you and firms like you who sort of put this out there as a possible win for everyone and promote it as opposed to just the energy savings. How big an impact do you think collectively or maybe individually have you had on moving this ball?
Well, I don't want to give ourselves too much credit, but I mean, it's something we've been putting out there for a long time. And I think trying as you said, try to educate clients, but I think also working, with the policymakers and the regulators. And, we were happy to live in a jurisdiction, the province of British Columbia and city of Vancouver, that they're fairly progressive. We have, lots of incentives around electrification projects. We have, the city of Vancouver moving forward with carbon regulations, carbon intensity regulations. And we've certainly provided input to the regulators as they've developed these policies and bylaws and things. And so that's been really gratifying to see that, basically to translate our experience with the built environment and, what we've been able to achieve in projects and use that to kind of inform some of the regulations that have been made. So, for example, trying to set that benchmark for, okay, well, what level of emissions intensity should we regulate to? And we've been able to offer some real world experience to help the policymakers, set an appropriate target that was, maybe not too loose, but not too aggressive, something that was achievable, I guess, within the realm of possibilities. And I think that helps make the policies more successful. Obviously, if you've got a policy that is either too lax, it'll be completely ineffectual. If it's too strict, people aren't going to be happy either, and will be rebelling against it. So I feel like a lot of pride that we've been able to contribute to some of those discussions. And certainly we're not the only ones, and a lot of our colleagues and peers in the industry have done the same. And I think collectively, I think we've helped make better policy as a result.
Well, that's a really good point about the creation of policy and how much policymakers, lawmakers need expert opinion in this, and how being part of that, part of a firm, or just collectively as an industry, how that impacts legislation around these issues. It can't be minimalized. I mean, that's pretty important.
Yeah, it's funny. We just actually earlier today, we were going through sort of internally at our company, just having a discussion about, so we care about the impact that our company makes. That's one of our key metrics of success is, okay, how much impact. And historically, we were trying to keep track of individual projects and the carbon savings on each project. And we had a goal of saving so many hundreds of thousands or a million tons by such and such a date. But over the last couple of years, just realizing a lot of the things that we are doing, a lot of the impact we're having, we can't track that way. So, for example, influencing a policy that gets developed, I can't put tons on that, but I know it's impactful. I know it has probably a lot more impact than a whole bunch of individual retrofits and things like that. So, we've gotten to thinking internally, like, okay, we need to reframe how we think about impact as a company. And it's not just these one-off projects that we're doing that are, they save carbon, and that's great. That feels great. But the scale of impact we want to have is magnified by affecting policy, by doing these demonstration projects that are examples for others, by taking the knowledge we've gained through, doing successful and not successful projects, and doing case studies, teaching courses, writing white papers. Like, there's all kinds of things that we're starting to do more of, and we're realizing that that's actually how we scale the impact to the level that it needs. We're a small company, we can't do it all, but if we want to try to influence the market in a bigger way, that's how we do it.
So tell us about the hiring process around your company. I mean, do you look for a certain mindset for a new hire towards environmental factors or concerns?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of exactly right. Is the values kind of go first. That's really the first thing we look for is to sort of vet. Okay, does this person care? Like, is this something? Are they looking to have a career where they can make an impact, and is that something that's important to them? And honestly, that matters more than experience or almost anything else. I mean, I came into this industry not knowing anything about HVAC. I was trained as an aerospace engineer. We've hired chemical engineers. I've hired environmental engineers. I've hired a lot of people over the years who are still with our firm and who are, extremely good at what they do, and they didn't have any technical background in this work. Now we've hired people that do have technical background, and they've been great as well. But the common denominator being that desire to make an impact, that they care about the environment, about climate change. And then, they can demonstrate that. I mean, it's not just sort of asking them, well, do you care about the environment? Because, I mean, the answer is going to be yes, but it's more of a what have you done? Like, what do you do? Either have you done so far in your career or in your personal life or your volunteer efforts? But, show us that you care. And that if you do, then you're probably going to fit in pretty well. And again, if you have the right technical skills, you have the right experience, if you know something already about what we do, great. That's a bonus. But first and foremost, the people who have been successful in our company, myself included, it's sort of been those values that have gone first.
Okay, well, that's a good segue into my next question, which is if somebody, a tech worker out there who was looking to make a switch or who's, found themselves out of a job all of a sudden and maybe hasn't heard of smart buildings or the automated building industry or whatever, how would you explain that to someone?
Every one of us have been in a building that has smart building systems. I think most people who aren't in the industry don't realize it. They don't have any idea what's kind of going on behind the curtain in terms of what makes these buildings work. It's software, it's hardware, it's control devices. At the end of the day, you're trying to ensure a comfortable environment for the people in the building, and try not to use too much energy while you do that. That's the lens I've always kind of looked at the smart building industry through. There's a need for good software writing, good programming. There's a need for good hard engineering skills in terms of the design and understanding the physics of how an HVAC system works. There's a need for the human side, understanding what actually makes people comfortable, which is surprisingly something that most engineers don't actually understand that well. And on top of that, there's just all this work optimizing these systems and getting them working just right and troubleshooting them, but at the same time making them usable and not overly complicated. And I think as the smart building has evolved, I mean, I've been doing this, I guess, 15 years now, a little more, and in that time, kind of just seeing the transition from still a lot of buildings with pneumatic controls. That was the smart building system of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then the transition to some of the early digital systems. And now when I started doing this, there was still some of those old systems, and everything was still dial-up modems. And now everything's online, everything's moving into the cloud. You really see the technology evolving, but not as fast as you would think, right? Like there's a lot of aspects of the smart building industry that in some ways seem stuck in the past, and that haven't evolved as fast as, say, the IT industry has with kind of very similar pieces of technology. And I think that's where this exciting opportunity is and when I watch people coming into this industry, especially if they have a tech background, is they immediately see all of the things. They're like, why are you still doing it that way? Like that was what we haven't been doing that in 10 years, 15 years. It's really fun and it's consistent. And so I think this is because it was a series of technologies put together by mechanical engineers and people who were used to pneumatic controls, and that shows in the technology. And it's evolving past that now. But I think there's this tremendous opportunity for people that really understand technology and understand network design and understand software and good use of AI. I think the potential is limitless. And I think you start to see some really exciting innovations happening in terms of people starting to apply machine learning and supervisory level of control. So, historically everything is like line code written to control this device and that device, and you write out a sequence of operations. But now you start to see people laying on top of that, kind of optimization systems that are using machine learning and other different kinds of algorithms to do it differently. That's the excitement I see in the next decade, let's say, of this industry.
One of the arguments I promote actively is that there's a lot to be gained personally and professionally from entering a market, which we won't say is necessarily behind, But if you're going to compare it to something like, well, what Apple does or what Microsoft does or whatever, technologically, it's back there, right? But the good side of that is the amount of potential that you have to contribute is astronomically larger, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, one of the things I can't stress enough in this is like it's how tangible it is. It's not like you're writing an app that's just going to be used for, whatever, right? Or a game. And I love apps, I love games, but the software you create for buildings, like it's running a real building. It has an impact on things in like very much in the real world, whether that be the energy use of the building, the comfort of the occupants, which has impacts on health and productivity. Like it's as real as it gets in terms of being able to affect change and like see something actually happen. I mean, I used to get so excited when we would do a project. We would, come in and recommission the controls, and then I'd look at the energy bills a month later, and you could see the drop. Like you could see the impact that you were having by just making some changes to some lines of code, or adding a new control device, or just changing how something operates. You get to see the impact of that, and that's real. I can count the tons of carbon, or the gigajoules, or the kilowatt hours that affects. And so I would say for anybody who is kind of feeling like, they want to make a difference, like this is a place you can make a difference. And that can be depending on the kind of firm you're with. I mean, that could be a difference kind of every day, just at the individual buildings, making people more comfortable, making the energy use in that building less, or it can be at the high level, trying to define better how every building works, or write policies that affect millions of buildings, across the country or across the state or city. Like there's a lot of different ways to come at it, but at the end of the day, it's they call it real estate for a reason, because it's like, it's something that's very tangible. That's what did it for me, is because I mean, I came from an academic background, which was, doing this thing, and it's a little piece of this bigger thing that's going to take 5 or 10 or 20 years to come to fruition. And, my piece is so small, and can you even really tell I've had an impact to, okay, I can really like pull a utility bill and understand the impact I've had, or go talk to a tenant or building operator and see the impact that my work has had on real people. That was for me the thing that really, I say, got me hooked, got me loving this industry.